Sorry, I'm like still like over here flabbergasted talking to Evelyn's mom. I'm like trying to regroup myself. But hey everyone, it's Nicole, Sarah Tech, and Julia. And we have her, that's not her official name, Evelyn's mom. But for many of you know, we've been helping little Evelyn and their family for I think like 2 months now. And they've been posting about Evelyn's journey, about how a hospital forced them to give her a medication that the parents did not want because they were concerned about the side effects. And lo and behold, the child ends up going blind and having other severe health complications because of it. So we're going to bring Jess Young on so she can tell you a little bit more about what's going on with little Evelyn. So let's bring her on. Hey, Jess.
Hi.
Hi. Hey. So go ahead, tell everyone about yourself and then dive on in onto how this freaking madness happened.
Yeah. So my family's just a pretty quiet family. We love privacy. We love playing games together and cooking. Pretty simple, minimalist life. We live pretty crunchy and naturally. My kids don't have any vaccinations because I've studied the risks and costs. That's been brought up in this scenario too a whole lot. So Evelyn is 10 years old and she started having edema in late June of this year, and it would go up and down, and she would look pretty close to normal for like a week at a time. And I would get really hopeful, like, she's doing better, this is great. And we were treating her with like herbal diuretics. So you know, I just thought she's doing better. She's struggling, but she's doing better. And then she would like swell back up. And so it would go up and down like that. Eventually, and we were hiring like natural care practitioners to help us in that journey. Like really early on, within 2 weeks, I'd already hired somebody and had consultation with them. I hired another person like mid-August, and then started deciding like, okay, let's go get some blood work done. And so I called a local allopathic place to go get labs, and that was scheduled for September 12th. And on August 31st, we were tucking the kids into bed, and Evelyn had been complaining for a couple nights that her inner thighs were sweaty. And I looked and I was like, well, I can see that there's sweat, but like, I don't know what that is. But on the night of the 31st, she said it again. And I was like, let me check again. So I looked, and she had like a little rash on her inner thighs. And I was like, oh, weird. Like the fluid is leaking out of that. So I looked it up and I was like, oh, it's called weeping edema. I don't know what this is. I don't know how to handle this. In the morning, let's get her in, see if we can get her in any sooner to the clinic that was going to be on the 12th. And they were like, no, sorry. And then I was like, okay. I called a functional medicine doctor who I was trying to get her into as well. And they were like, you should take her to the ER because they'll do things faster. You'll get results quicker. So we took her into the local ER, and they could not get a vein. So they even used a Doppler, and they just couldn't find it, or an ultrasound, I mean. And they said, well, you could take her to Topeka, or you could take her to Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City. And both of them are going to have the tech to find this better. Like, they've got much better equipment than we do. But if you find out she's got some sort of a kidney, problem or whatever, all the specialists are at Children's Mercy. Like, it's a children's hospital, and there's all these specialists there, and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay, let's take her to Children's Mercy. And it was probably one of the top 5 worst decisions of my life. Because the first doctor, I think his name is Dr. Srivastava. He has been working there for a long time. He's the oldest nephrologist there. He lied to me about the dosage of steroids she would be receiving. He lied to me about side effects. And I I felt uncomfortable with him. Eventually, Evelyn, I wasn't telling her, oh, that guy is lying to me. He's full of crap. But Evelyn said, he makes me feel so uncomfortable. I don't like him. He's so creepy to me. So I told the floor doctor after we got off the PICU, I was like, look, I don't like him because he's lying to me, but no one is touching my daughter's body without her consent. Like, she gets that bodily autonomy. So he was like, oh, he'll be right in to do a check. And I was like, no, he won't. And he was like, well, I can't make that decision. I've got to talk to my superiors. And I was like, you go right ahead, but he's still not touching her. Like, I'm telling you, she does not have anyone touch her body she doesn't want to. She doesn't feel uncomfortable with anybody else. Anybody else can come do checks on her, but he won't. And he still tried to tell me it wasn't up to me. And I'm telling that because that is just one way in which
how is it not up to you?
Yep, exactly. But that's how Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City works, is bodily violation, moment after moment after moment. And it's not just our experience. We've talked to like hundreds of families at this point, and many of them like did the route that most parents choose, which is, I'm so scared for my kid. I don't think this is safe, but you shut your mouth to get your kid out as fast as possible and hope that they don't die in the process. And I wasn't willing to do that. And so I don't blame parents who feel that scared and they just hope their kid makes it. I just wasn't willing to do it myself. And so that's how this whole hospital works, is, oh, that's neat. We'll see if you can get permission to have bodily autonomy here. So they just lied. Like, the more doctors I interacted with, I realized this is not a specific doctor. It's the system training them to be this way. And we were lied to about the goalposts of when she could be discharged. At first it was, well, the labs have to be good enough for me to feel good about them. That was from Dr. Spector. And I said, so like feelings, like you don't have a set marker for your labs to have that? I've got this on audio recording. And he was like, well, it's not an exact, kind of like a changing day by day, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't understand how this is all scientifically based, and yet you're going to end up going off your gut feelings on this one. But he said, I think if we have a few days of really good, improving and stable labs, that we could really consider like she's going to be released. And I was like, sweet. And then we had 4 days of good and improving labs by the evening of the 9th, or maybe it was the morning of the 10th. And I had asked him, so you said that if she had a few days of good like labs that we'd talk about discharge. And he was like, well, I think she's going to be here at least another week. And I was like, what now? And we talked about,
did he give you a reason on why
Nope.
she was going to be there another week?
Nope. He just said, I just don't feel good about it yet. Which, if I were to say the kind of bullshit that these people were saying to me, to CPS, we'd have our children stolen. Like, well, I'm just restricting their water to 1 cup a day because I did some labs, and I don't want the water intake to influence blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, wait, like, so you're dehydrating this child? Or like they had her wait 18 hours between eating one time because they wanted her to do a biopsy, which I understood the biopsy part, but after the biopsy was done, they said she could eat immediately after, and then she had to wait another 6 hours after that. And we were begging and begging for her to have food because she was so hungry. And like, if parents did this to their kids, we'd all have them stolen, but somehow they get to do this because they've got a little fancy paper napkin that somebody signed to say, this person's a doctor. So it's really insane to me. He marked that down in her medical files as me having troubling questions. When I made the note that if parents were to treat children the way that they were treating my child, like starving her for 18 hours and restricting her fluid to like just over a cup, it was like a cup and a half or something of fluid she could have on a certain day. And I was like,
yes, I just want to ask, she doesn't have COVID, right?
Nope. No,
No.
she's never
Guys, she doesn't have COVID, but they're still not giving her food and water.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was thinking the same thing. Because that's how they treat COVID patients.
So
that's how they treat COVID patients.
Yeah. No food, no water.
Food, no water, or too much fluid, and you gain 20, 30 pounds of water weight, and then you die.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, we've avoided that whole.
Yeah, I just wanted to check because I know everyone's gonna say like, wait, does she have COVID? Like, why are they starving her?
No. This is interesting because there's two things with you asking me that question. There's two things about that. First of all, in their medical records and the CPS report, they wrote that before we took her into the emergency room, we were giving her an excessive amount of fluid. And I told them that we had worked her up to under 5 cups of fluid a day because she was like drinking so little at one point that I was like, oh crap, she needs more fluid because maybe her body is actually holding on to fluid because it's not getting enough, which I had read about that being a possibility for people with edema. And so I was like, we've got to get a little more fluid in you than like a cup of fluid a day. And they wrote in the CPS report that under 5 cups was an excessive amount of fluid and noted that as being abusive to her because she had edema. Like, they are so freaking insane and evil at that hospital. And the second part of that, when you asked about COVID, is she got a common cold at the end of her imprisonment at CMH. And she was sick for 3 days with like the beginning stages of the cold, and nobody said anything. And there was one nurse who got real twitchy on the day she got a little cough that went from like in her throat down into like the top of her chest a little, and nobody else cared that whole time. But this one nurse was like, oh no. And so she started paper gowning, goggling, gloving, like the whole 9 yards, called the doctor, and then they kept pushing for a COVID test. And she had been forced one at the beginning of the stay, like 4 days in, which was weird that they waited 4 long days to test her for COVID, but okay.
They do it in the ER when you first walk in.
Yeah. And they didn't. They did it in the PICU, her first round in the PICU. So that was the only time, besides when she got sick from the CellCept, when she was fully conscious, awake, and aware, that she screamed and like pulled her body away, was when they put the nasal swab in. And like, she hated it. And they were like, oh, we didn't go that far up. And I'm like, clearly you did, because like most people aren't going to lie about that. But okay. So when they said, well, you need to do a nasal swab, the second time she was like, no, I'm not doing it. And they were like, if you don't do it, you'll be quarantined for 4 weeks. And I thought, the CDC doesn't even have that. Like, what are you talking about? That's the most unhinged thing. Like, everything is unhinged there. So it's not a surprise when they said that. But they'd already planned at that point that she would be discharged on the 19th of.
They're not even following CDC guidelines for.
Nope, they're not. They're not. And it's in her
7 days.
Yeah, it's in her medical files, and CPS has that in the reporting that they wanted her to be quarantined for 4 weeks. So they have, even though they lied about a ton of stuff in the medical records, which I can get to in a minute, they still, even though they were trying to cover their butts, they exposed themselves as completely incompetent over and over and over, like that. Like, even the CDC lowered their guidelines for quarantine down from like 14 days down to, is it 5, I think?
Something.
Like it's way lower. So to go to like 4 weeks, and they had already said that she would be discharged on the 19th. And then they were like, oh, well, it would be 4 weeks of quarantine would put her getting out on November 9th. And we actually laughed because that's when the court date is. And we were like, wouldn't it be neat if you were with her the whole time in the hospital and they drop the case and we walk right on out of there on the 9th? And that'd be great. But yeah. So
talk about like the
she just had RSV. She had a common cold, which we repeatedly said, she's just got a cold. And by the time CPS made her do the test, which she was held down to do this test, and the nurse wouldn't even look her in the face, and she left immediately after, because I'm pretty sure that nurse felt hopefully pretty scummy. But they came back and it was just the common cold, and it had already been 2 days since the cough had left her. She didn't even have a cough or anything anymore. So yeah, it's nuts.
So let's talk about, I wanted to make sure I wasn't on mute because my dogs are barking. Let's talk about the CellCept and how you said you weren't comfortable with the side effects of these drugs because you were concerned what could happen, what you discovered CellCept is, and what happened to Evelyn when she had CellCept.
So when they presented CellCept to me, they were like, so that's what we want to do, okay? And I was like, not okay. I haven't researched it yet. And I don't just go Google stuff. I look things up on the CDC website. I look up articles through JAMA. I look up a bunch of stuff when I am researching. So you're going to have to give me a while to really fully understand what this drug does and any of the side effects. And I'm like, okay, but she really needs to start it within the next 24 hours. So I looked it up, and the common side effects include vomiting and diarrhea, like profuse vomiting and diarrhea. There's so much more too that are really horrible. But I fixated on that because Evelyn, at 10 years old, 4'1", her baseline weight was 75 pounds. And that is not unhealthy. It's just on the slender side. And I was really concerned that if she was puking and having diarrhea for a long time, that she would get dehydrated and lose too much weight. And I said, you guys have already noted that you are concerned that she might lose too much weight, blah, blah, blah. So like, why would you give her a drug that could risk her health like that? And there's even more. That's just the lower level of the common side effects. It gets more severe from there, just in the common. And I'm hearing a bell. Okay. Sorry. The floor doctor, Dr. Wozniak, said to me, common doesn't mean it happens all the time. And I was like, that's exactly what common means. What are you talking about? And that's on, I mean, all of these conversations are on recording. So it's deranged that they do this. Anyways, so I was like, I don't like that. You need to find me an alternative. I actually never, I complied with all the things they wanted to do. I asked for an alternative to a blood pressure med after she had her biopsy. The side effects to that were high blood pressure, heart attack, and stroke, I think. And I was like, no, find me something better. So his second suggestion was edema, dizziness, and nausea. And I was like, okay, it's a temporary drug, and she's already dealing with edema. And if she's dizzy, they've got her bed bound. So, okay, let's go with that second one. And it worked. And the next day, the doctor came in to tell me what her new drug routine was going to be. And then he said, oh, and my first choice of drug would have been perfectly safe and fine. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys are nuts. Like, it's already been done. I don't know why you feel the need to ego trip on me right now. So the CellCept was the second drug that I said I really want an alternative for. And that one, oh man, nausea or vomiting and diarrhea is the least dangerous of the common side effects there. And I said, it's just too dangerous. So the alternative they came to me with was pretty much had all the exact same side effects, but they said it was actually a little more dangerous and finicky. And so she'd have to be monitored more often at the hospital. And I was like, oh my gosh, you guys are insane. And And so I told him, and I have this on audio recording, all the decisions we have made from this point at the hospital, I'm under duress. You have used the dead child card multiple times on me, even for something like blood pressure meds when her blood pressure is I forget. The upper one is diastolic. Yeah. It was like 135. And for a 10-year-old girl, it should be in the 110 to 120 range. And I was like, that's high, but it's not deadly. She's not going to die from 135, like over whatever. But I knew as soon as they said she could die if she doesn't have this, that if I said no, it's a red flag for neglectant parent and CPS gets called. So I was like, crap, okay, let's do that. And I told him, all of these things have been under duress. How can we consent when everything you say is dead child card? And I know that you'll call CPS if I say no to just enough things. And I told him, we came here for blood draws. I didn't want to come here to get her drugged up and like have all these side effects and stuff. I'm treating her with other practitioners, and I wanted blood labs for this to know how to better help her. And so I used the phrase, after talking about how they are using the dead child card and everything, that you guys basically have a gun to our heads and we have to do everything you say or a child gets stolen from us. And I'm not under any illusion that it's anything other than that. And I said, so under duress, I'm consenting to this drug because I know that my daughter is safest with me. And he wrote that down in the medical records as only me saying they had a gun to our heads. He did offer me psychiatric help at that meeting. And we'd already talked about how our family does EMDR therapy from time to time. Like, I'm not immune to using therapy as needed. I love getting therapy, honestly. But I said, no, thanks, because I know that their psychiatrist is going to keep case records on us and use it to twist and manipulate very real human feelings that are valid and normal to have. And I was like, no, thank you. I'm going to pass on that. But he wrote it down as he offered me psychiatric help and I declined it. Like I did, like I didn't want any. So she was given CellCept on about 8:00 on September 9th. And by September 10th at 3 a.m., she started vomiting profusely. Like it was projectile vomiting. And by noon, and I'd already gotten really angry and gone to patient advocates that Friday. So on the 9th, like, look, his goalposts for when she can be discharged are changing, and I'm concerned that he's going to try to trap her here. And so they were like, well, we'll figure this out. And I said, let's work on that on Monday, because then it'll have been double the time he said she needed good labs. And nobody can say I'm not patient about this. So on Monday, we were going to work on that together. I don't know how much the patient advocate who gets paid by the hospital really would have helped us. But so Saturday by noon, she had been vomiting since 3 a.m. and I had lost track at 23 times of vomiting. And I was getting concerned, but I was also like, well, maybe this will be temporary. I want to wait a day and see. But by noon, I was rubbing her back while she was vomiting, and I pulled back from her a little bit, and I wasn't rubbing her back anymore, but I was sitting on the bed, and I said something, and she said, Mom, where are you? And I knew like it was registering really rapidly. Like I said, what do you mean I'm right in front of you? And she'd already lost her vision at that point. And I immediately was like, I can't be patient anymore. I have to get her out of here. Sorry, I haven't talked about this part in a couple of weeks.
Take your time.
I called my husband and I said, we have to get her out of here. I think they're going to kill her. Like, I think they're going to kill her with this drug and they're not going to stop. So he came and we were like, we knew we had to pretty much sneak getting out of there. So we were like, hey, we're going to take her on a walk in the wheelchair, blah, 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 blah. And I had gotten them every single day at rounds, making sure that they said that her vitals were great and that her labs were constantly improving. So I have that on audio, them constantly saying how great she was doing. And then when we took her out AMA, like we were trying to take her out AMA, I was like, I have you on recording saying her vitals are stable, her labs are improving, and she is not in an emergent condition. I did not tell them that she was blind at that point because I was terrified that if they found out, they were going to try to drug her with something else or do some other test that would hurt her even further. And my husband and I were like, let's take her to KU and see if they can help her better. And I knew I was so scared because I knew like we were risking them taking her. But the cost of that, like compared to them killing her, was just like, it's too great. So we tried to take her out and they kept us there for like 2.5 hours. And sorry, man. Okay. They told us over and over for the first like hour and a half that they could help us transport her. And we were like, we want you to have nothing to do with this. You've lied to us constantly. You wouldn't listen to us when we said this would be dangerous for her. And she's been vomiting at that point for like 16 hours. And you've endangered her life. There's no way I would trust you to have her transported anywhere. We're taking her and we'll call you and have a doctor confirm to you that she's there when we get there. And they just kept saying like, we can do it. She can't leave unless the PICC line is removed. And I was like, no, I know that's not true. People take PICC lines home and do injections at home themselves all the time. Like, and they can use the PICC line. So I don't understand what this is about. And they're like, well, we'll go get somebody. And then all of a sudden they wouldn't do the PICC line removal. And I was like, so you're not medically kidnapping her, but you said she can't leave without the PICC line removed, and yet you're not going to take it out. So you're medically kidnapping her. And they kept stressing, you know, she's doing great, but she could crash at any minute. And I'm like, that can happen to anybody. I could be talking to a dude on the street and he dies of a heart attack in front of me. Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's nuts.
Pretty frequently nowadays.
Yeah. There was a boy, by the way. I don't know if you read the headlines. He was a young college student, and the headline was, it was his name, and college student, blah, 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 died of joy upon getting the results of his final. And I was like, what? Died of joy? Like, that's it. That's the headline.
Anyway, that's now a reason for death.
Yes, died of joy, died of getting air, died of not getting air, died of eating food, whatever. I mean, like you looked at a butterfly and you died. It's a mystery.
Went to the beach and you died.
It's all a mystery, isn't it? So, anyways, I knew they were getting social services. I could feel it. We were recording that entire time. There were spots where we'd stop because nobody was talking to us. And I said it on one of the recordings, don't record at the same time because we need to save battery, because I was like, I don't know how long they're going to try to hold us here and how long we have to record for. So like conserve battery. And so I'd shut off when nobody was there. And as soon as somebody would show up, it was back on. But until they got CPS of Missouri involved, they were only saying that they could help us transport her. Once they got CPS involved, it suddenly changed to, she is too medically fragile to transport. And I was like, how can any parent make an informed decision about transporting their child if nobody's telling them that she's too medically fragile until after CPS has gotten involved? So that's a real neat little thing. So in the medical records, they wrote that they offered us transport multiple times. In the CPS report, they omitted that and only wrote that they told us how fragile she was and we still wanted to take her out, as though like we had been told before CPS got involved and we were neglectant of her. And I'm like, you did say that, but it was only after CPS got involved. It's not the full story. So they told us, once we knew that CPS had stolen our daughter from us, they told us that we were allowed to be in the room with Evelyn. They thought it would be best for her healing, but if we used inappropriate language, if they caught us recording, if we inhibited them from giving her any drugs in any way, which we never had, that we would be kicked off the premises for 24 hours. And I think I cursed like 2 times in a 2.5 hour period of trying to get our daughter rescued out of that demon pit. And Dr. Wiedemann is the nephrologist that like ended up coming to me after CPS was involved and saying, she's just too medically fragile. And I was like, this is bullshit. And this is a fucking night hole, like a demonscape or something. I mean, Justin said Darcy, and she was like, it's Dr. Wiedemann, thank you. And this is just more of this whole like ego trip, like bull crap, lack of humility from these people who really think that they never make mistakes and can't be human. So he was like, well, why does it say Darcy on your name tag? And she's like, I have worked very hard for this title. And he's like, then maybe you shouldn't have Darcy on there. And she's like, I suppose not. So it's just this, like, that's the whole vibe, every part of it, like down to what language you can use, what's acceptable to say about having your child kidnapped. So we eventually took Evelyn into the room, and I was like, fine, okay, I've got to go home. I had been with her for 11 days, and I'm a real homebody, and I'm actually the private person, like of our marriage. Justin is much more outgoing, and I was like, I need to go home and see the kids. I haven't seen them in 11 days. Why don't you stay with Evelyn? And then we can swap out again in a little bit, because I wanted to be with Evelyn too. And so that was our plan. So I started loading stuff up, and I was really scared because I was like, they're going to put her on more CellCept. Like, they're just going to keep pumping this into her. And one of the nurses came in and said, I don't remember which order it was. It's in the audio tapes or the audio recordings. One thing she said was, she kept asking, like, there were 2 nurses in there, and one of them kept asking her what order she wanted her IV drugs in. Like, you're asking a 10-year-old. I'm 40 and I don't know, nor do I care what order I would be getting IV drugs in. But I think that the reason they were doing that is I'd had multiple conversations with the doctors that Evelyn felt like she had no bodily autonomy in there. And I said, that's something that's a core value to our family. It has been since they've all been born. Like, we talk about it a lot, that our body is our own. Nobody can touch it unless we want them to. This is a very different environment than anything they've grown up in. You guys just walk in and lift up her gown and say, I'm gonna check you now. And they're like, oh, well, we didn't realize that. So their suggestion. And I was like, so are you going to give her the bodily autonomy and let her choose the drugs that she does and does not want in her body? And they're like, well, I'm like, so they wanted to put a sign up on her door that said that the family desires bodily autonomy. So don't ask Evelyn if she wants any procedures done. Tell her what is going to happen so that she doesn't feel violated as much. Sorry.
The train of thought of what they are doing is just mind-boggling.
Ask for permission. Can I lift up your gown so I can listen to your belly?
Yeah.
And it's so weird.
You don't ask a 10-year-old what order of medications. The nurse should know what order of medications and tell her.
Exactly. So I think that the nurse was doing that to make herself feel better, like she was letting Evelyn have choices in the drugs she didn't even want to begin with. And I was like, Evelyn's like 10 and she doesn't know what order she wants them in. So it might be easier for you to just do it in whatever is easiest for you. And she was like, don't tell us how to do our job. And I was like, what now? What? Like, I'm trying to help you do your job, actually, crazy lady. And then that was Nurse Kylie, because I don't remember if this was before or after. I'd have to re-listen to the audio. And honestly, every time I've listened to it, I end up like crying so hard. So I avoid listening to it. she then tells Evelyn, or before that said, just lay back, sweetie, and it'll be over before you know it. And I was like, that sounds like a rapist. Like, it sounds like an actual rapist. I've heard women say that that's happened to them when they've been raped, is their abuser will say, like, just lay back and it'll be over before you know it. And so my mouthiness was like, yeah, Evelyn, just lay back and get medically raped and it'll be over before you know it. And they were like, that's inappropriate. And I said, it's less inappropriate me saying it than you actually doing it right now. And that was actually the comment that got us kicked out for 24 hours, was me saying she was being medically raped. They said that impeded their ability to give her the drugs that she needed. And I'm like, your hurt feelings impeded you from giving her drugs. Okay, whatever. So we were out for 24 hours. And if you go to my Facebook page, you can see, I waited until she was safe out of CMH before I showed the original picture. But Justin got back on the evening of the 11th because he was kicked out. We were kicked out on the evening of the 10th. He got back on the evening of the 11th, and Evelyn did not have this. I don't know if people can see this, but there was a massive rash down her right arm towards the side, and it was a rectangle. And on the top of that was a diamond-shaped indentation that I would say is like maybe an inch in diameter. I think I'm an inch across. Sorry, my brain's not mathing right now. So it was a diamond-shaped indentation, which did not go away for days. And her pitting edema, like you could put a finger in and it would go away within seconds. So it was not the edema that caused that indentation. And we were like, what the heck happened to her while we were gone? Why did they want her? Why did they want us gone for 24 hours? Because it was really clear they were making sure we were gone for something. And even now, so that was on the evening of the 10th or the morning of the 11th that they caused some sort of rash on her arm and formed an indentation that lasted for days on the back of her arm. And even now, she has a rash where that indentation was, and it is diamond shaped, exactly where that indentation was. And it's got spider veins in it. We don't know what they did to her, but it's really clear they wanted us gone for that 24 hours to experiment on her somehow. So,
do you have all the medical records to be able to look and see what they did during that 24 hours while you weren't there?
Yeah, except there's so many lies in the medical records. Like Evelyn, when she finally gained conscious, so that night, or not that night, but early the next morning, she lost consciousness and she was unconscious for almost 3 days. And I mean, it's been a nightmare. When she finally woke up, she could pretty much only say yeah, like for several days. So when she'd talk to me, I'd be like, are you okay? Yeah. Are you hurt? Yeah. Like she just couldn't function beyond that. Like I feel like God's so good because she's rapidly overcome so much from that point. We really didn't think like she'd ever be herself again. And personality wise, she is absolutely back. I'm so like, she has a educational hurdles to overcome. She has neurological disability, severe neurological disability now, but her personality is there. And I feel like that was like my personal, like, I don't want that to go away. Like her personality is so beautiful and I was scared that was going to be gone. So the other things we can totally overcome. And I think she's going to heal from those. Like, I don't know when, but you know, that her personality's there makes me happy because that's the essence of Evelyn, you know? So, yeah, we don't know. And so she was blind for days. She was blind that night when we left. We have like she was blind even after she became conscious for a little while. And Dr. Wozniak, the attendant, I think he was a resident. I think those are the guys who travel from hospital to hospital to get training. I'm not sure about allopathy a whole lot, but he goes around from hospital to hospital for a month at a time to get training before he becomes like licensed, or I don't know. He's the one who told me common doesn't mean it happens all the time. And he was the only one I told the nurses before we left, Evelyn's blind and I was scared to tell you because I didn't want you to drug her anymore or test her and terrorize her. And the nurse is on the audio recording saying, I'll tell blah, blah, blah. And the next morning, Dr. Wiedemann called to give me rounds report, and I told her too. Neither one of them wrote that Evelyn was blind in her medical records. And Dr. Wiedemann in the 9/11 report spent like 3 to 4 sentences writing about how I told her my phone was recording our phone conversation. But nothing about Evelyn being blind. She was mentally deranged, something that she was fixated on how I was recording the conversation rather than Evelyn's actual health. So Justin went in on the 11th, so that wasn't in that medical record. On the 12th, Dr. Wozniak wrote in there, Dad says that a patient has lost her vision. I was only made aware that there was visual disturbance. And I'm like, well, that's pretty interesting that you were made aware of that since it's not in her medical records for the last 2 days. How were you made aware of that? So they were talking about stuff amongst each other and just deliberately not writing it in. And then when she finally got conscious enough, she was telling people she was blind. Justin was right there. And despite being told that we couldn't record, Justin was recording while he was in there. And like, what are they going to do about that? Like, they can't ask him over and over. So he has that conversation on recording of Dr. Wozniak hearing Evelyn say she had been blind. And in the medical records, he writes multiple days in a row that Evelyn denied that she had ever been blind. So I'm never going to know from their end what they did to her while we were gone for 24 hours. The only way we're going to know is we've sent off for hair analysis testing, and that might tell us something, but even then it might not. So they definitely did something. They definitely did something.
Absolutely unreal. Just everything.
It is truly a medical nightmare. And I just have no understanding of how there's anybody in the universe that can hear stories like this. If we dropped the audio, you'd hear like, I'm not lying, I'm telling the truth, which we're about to drop some audio with patient advocate bulldogs of the night we were trying to get her out. How is there anybody that believes this doesn't happen to families is beyond me. Like, medical kidnapping and medical torture is a very real thing. And they've done it to my daughter. So it's rough. But yes, when she came home, when she was at the hospital, the day before, I think she was released even, PT tried to get her to like go upstairs in the PT room because we have stairs at our house. So it's going to be important for her to be able to go up and down stairs. And she's 10. She's never had developmental delays. So she's never been terrified to go up and down stairs, even as a toddler. You know, like they're hesitant, but they're not afraid to go up and down stairs. I was there on the 15th. And she went up one stair and her body just started tremoring with terror, like trying to go up the next step. She couldn't do it. And they tried to do steps again the day before she left and she couldn't do it. And when she got home that night, she just went right up the steps, like right up. So like she was filled with terror just by being there. Like, so this is absolutely the best place for her. And even CPS of Kansas knows that. They're telling her attorneys, we don't even know why this case got started. And I'm like, I do, because Missouri CPS and Children's Mercy Hospital have a cash cow going between each other. So they have incentive to do this. Kansas CPS doesn't. They're not financially incentivized to kidnap kids on that level through that hospital. So they've written to us, like our attorneys, they've told us at like CPS meetings, we're not sure why this case even got started. You guys seem like completely adequate, helpful, caring parents. We don't see any reason why she shouldn't be returned to you, and the case dropped. And yet here's St. Francis Ministries. One of the workers specifically is just like, you can tell by how she talks, like she doesn't want the cash cow to stop. So she is working way harder to like, well, you don't have therapies done in time. And I'm like, we had 1.5 weeks to get her in anywhere. And everybody, the closest I could get was out of town, or the soonest I could get was out of town, and 2 weeks. Like, do better. You call, you make these connections. If you're concerned, like, we're going to these therapies. She's severely neurologically damaged. She has to have them. Like, I'm not delaying them. I have like, I'm trained as a restorative exercise specialist under Katie Bowman. I don't know if you know who that is. She has written like a lot of books about biomechanical work. And so I'm really fully adept at body movement and helping my daughter with PT and OT type things. Speech, not so much. I need somebody to help step in along that, but like, I'm just like, you already know my background and my training. So why are you so freaked out that she has the earliest appointment I can make anywhere, even out of town, is 2 weeks away? That's just nuts. We can do stuff at home. So when I cornered them and found out that they had no plan of their own, and I asked them repeatedly, you're asking us to take her back to her abusers who almost murdered her, they were like, wait, no, we're not trying to make you do that. It's just a suggestion. And I was like, it's disturbing that your professional opinion is that I should take her back to people who almost murdered her, and you're supposed to be more fit to make decisions for her than we are right now. That's gross and disturbing. And then they changed it to, well, if you sign the parenting plan tonight and get it to us, we'll let you take her home tomorrow. So we signed that under duress, not because we're doing these therapies under duress, but it's under duress that we are having anything to do with CPS. Like, we didn't invite them into our life. We have no reason. They have literally no evidence. And our attorneys had an attorney meeting with them, I think last week, maybe last Thursday, and gave them our position paper and attached like the 2.5 hours of audio from the night we tried to escape, pictures of Evelyn, gave them the list of practitioners we had contacted beforehand, because CMH said we had neglected her and hadn't gotten her to see anybody before we took her into CMH, which they knew wasn't true. And I have the audio recordings from my phone calling these allopathic providers in the middle of August. So like, they got that, hearing that, oh, I was calling these providers to get her in way before CMH. Like, we were doing what we could to help her, and also trying to be safe and natural with her so she didn't have a bunch of side effects like encephalopathy, blindness, and unconsciousness for 3 days. I think that's crazy too. None of the herbs I have in my house can cause a seizure. None of the herbs I have in my house can cause somebody to go blind. That's their crap. I'm not the one gambling my kid's life away, only by taking her to CMH, I suppose. So
and I don't even understand why they even gave her CellCept.
CellCept is a drug for patients that are going to have a transplant, an organ transplant, which she's not one.
Exactly. And that's where I don't understand why they even pulled that into the mix. It's a transplant medication.
It's horrifying. So we now have actually safe nephrologist who's like, why the heck did they give her this drug? Why do they have her on this other drug? Yada, yada, yada. And then he's been going through a medical file. He's horrified. Like, he's genuinely horrified, because they did the kidney biopsy and all the test results should have been back within 72 hours. And it took them 4 weeks, I think, to get the last of the kidney biopsy results in. And it came back to them inconclusive. They wanted to diagnose her with immune complex glomerular nephritis, and the biopsy lab results didn't show that. And so they told us it was inconclusive. So they sent it to a second lab, which also took multiple weeks to get back. And it also came back inconclusive. And so they just now, over a month and a half later, asked for a second medical opinion on the second round of trying to get the biopsy results in. And our new nephrologist was like, oh, you know what this looks like from a medical standpoint? They know they screwed up and they're covering their asses because they put her on CellCept before the first lab results came back from that final part of the biopsy. They'd already tried to put her on CellCept before they knew what her diagnosis was. And they also did the biopsy while she still had swelling around her kidneys, which is contraindicated for kidney biopsies. You need to have all the swelling off before you do that because it can actually increase a lot of other problems besides kidney problems. They were totally incompetent morons at this hospital. I'm sure there's some really lovely people that work there. It wasn't any of the people we interacted with in the nephrology department. So, yeah, they are trying to cover their butts. And our doctor said, well, and then another one, this is where they caught themselves. Once CPS of Kansas was had the case, it had been transferred to them. Dr. Willig is a nephrologist there, and she was obsessed with getting Evelyn on lavoxithyrein. I think that's what it's called. It's a synthetic thyroid drug, which I'd already bought naturally desiccated thyroid for her, like online. I have to use that for myself, but I got extra for her, knowing that steroids can damage the thyroid, and I wanted it there proactively in case I started to see signs of thyroid damage in her too. And so Dr. Willig told Justin that Evelyn had hypothyroidism and she had to have this synthetic thyroid drug. And I've known about how inadequate that drug is from other people who have used it, which is how I learned to just get on NDT before I even bothered trying that crap. And it's really helpful. Anyways, I said, well, if she's having trouble with her thyroid, we want her to get help. But you guys have access to a prescription of naturally desiccated thyroid called Armor, and that's what she needs to be on. And the doctor was like, I don't know anything about that. So she didn't want to research it. And then she's like, I'm going to hand you over to the endocrinology team. And at a care team meeting, one Friday, she handed out these papers and stressed to the CPS workers and St. Francis workers and the attorneys that Evelyn had to be on this drug. And it was important because, you know, she could die from whatever, like, okay. And the next week, the following Thursday, I think it was, the endocrinologist finally came in to Justin and Evelyn and said, good news, her thyroid's in excellent condition. And actually her whole endocrinology panel is excellent. Wait, what? So this doctor was going to put her on another toxic drug without having any labs to back it up. And that idiot made sure to make a big point of what, like, F up parents we were for not wanting Evelyn on this dangerous drug that can cause heart palpitations and all sorts of other things, made a big point of how Evelyn had to have it. And then you come to find out within less than a week that she hadn't even done any labs for it. That is pretty much every situation we found ourselves in with the nephrology team. So I waited till drop names until today when I knew that Evelyn was not in that hospital anymore, because the hospital told us that if we dropped names of any of the doctors that we would not see Evelyn again. So, which is illegal. They can't do that. We knew that. But at the same time, I'm like, hey, look, they called CPS already with an unlawful case. So they're going to just do whatever the frick they want. And so we were nervous to drop the names until she was out of CMH care. I've had parents contact me and say, my kid is in the nephrology department. I'm so scared. Can you tell me the doctor's names? And I wanted to so bad. So here's my advice for any parents with their kids in the nephrology department at CMH. Trust none of them. None of them. All of them are garbage human beings who will kill your kid, to steal their kidneys, to experiment on them, to have them put into the state kidnapping ring of CPS. Don't trust any of them. So that's my advice. If you see a name and it has nephrology after it, try to get out of there as quick as possible.
Run as fast as possible.
Yep. And do it. If you have to do it the way of most parents and you just hope your kid makes it out alive, that's what you got to do, you know, you do it. But if you feel like compelled, maybe like to get your kid out and not wait and see if they die or survive, get an attorney first, because they're going to hunt you down. It happens to so many families. Mike Searpot is a senator in Jackson County, I think. And he had his nephew's child was stolen by CMH when they tried to get a second medical opinion as well. And even with Mike Searpot's political clout and financial connections, it took his nephew 6 months to get their kids out of CPS. And he was a baby. So Mike Searpot has, in March of this year, he tried to pass legislation to protect families, not from hospitals, but from CMH, because there's story after story. You can look up Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City medical kidnapping, and there's dozens of news stories about this. And there's not many other hospitals where you can actually get that many hits. Boston's Children's Hospital also gets that many hits, but like we looked up the Mayo Clinic and Via Ascension Christi. We were just looking up all these hospitals, and you just don't find medical kidnapping stories about them too often, if ever. And Children's Mercy has so many. We're not alone. Like this happens over and over and over. And if you go to saveevelyn.com, there are at least 2 other moms that do interviews with Rebel News there, and their stories are horrifying. Like they're genuinely horrifying. Tiffany's son, Jackson, had it so much worse. He was chained to a bed at 8 years old because he kept trying to pull the fire alarm to get home to his mom and dad. And
God.
So the hospital eventually chained this little 8-year-old up to the bed, and they took the phone out of his room so he couldn't call his family anymore. And then they put a diaper on him and left him in his own waste so that sorry, this is so hard to talk about his story, and I'm sure it's worse for Tiffany. He got sores because they left him in his diaper for so long. And Tiffany didn't get custody back of her son. He was 8 and he's 16 now. And it's horrifying. There's 7 moms that connected before our family from CMH. And only one of the families ever got their kids back. And it took 4 years of being in CPS before she got her kids back. And she has 4 kids. 2 of them aged out of the system, and the other 2 she got back after 4 like fucking horrible years fighting for them. So that we have Evelyn back, like that we have Evelyn back right now is like, it's a miracle. It is like seriously a miracle. So I feel like amazingly happy that we have her home, even though we've still got like the November 9th hearing and possibly even more if they don't drop it then. But it's also like, it feels so unfair. It feels so unfair that like we get to have her home and all these families have been destroyed by CMH. And I want them to have the same story that we're having. Sorry.
It's unbelievable that you're one of many.
Yeah.
This has happened to.
Yeah, this isn't an isolated situation by any means.
Not. There's a baby. There's a baby that died there in August, and his family was told that he was brain dead. And they wanted a second medical opinion because they were like, okay, we've heard stories of people like being diagnosed as brain dead and waking up on the operating table. Like, we want somebody to do this. So CMH wouldn't let them get a second medical opinion for the status of their baby's dead. And they tried to get their baby out and they were arrested. They're facing jail time right now because of that. And their baby was taken off of life support and died while they were locked up in jail. CMH is like seriously so evil. And I just want to warn parents, I'm never going to stop. I have like followed CPS kidnapping cases for like 16 years, starting with Isaac Lethbridge. I used to follow his mom's blog and learned about it. And I was like, there's no way, like, this isn't true with all the things she's saying and the things she can share about this. And I can't believe that it's so prevalent at this specific hospital. So my best advice is don't go to CMH. Like, don't go to Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City. And I guess if I wanted give, save, go for anything, like, who wants to pitch in for a billboard across the street from the hospital to warn people not to go in there? I mean, I've been an advocate and shared all these stories I've read about medical kidnapping for 16 years, but like, I can literally never stop now. Like, I'm never going to stop exposing CMH. And I hate that because I am a private person and I don't like having a public life. But these kids need more of us out there that are tireless advocates to save them from demon hellholes like CMH. And so I'm really grateful you guys are.
Does everyone hear this story? That she was a private person until somebody abused her child, and now she's taken up the advocacy to make sure this doesn't happen again. That was literally the mission, and this is how American Frontline Nurses started. So this is not an isolated situation. So Jess doesn't have a Give, Send, Go set up for little Evelyn, but if you want to, you can donate to American Frontline Nurses, and in the donation tab say for Evelyn, and we will cut a check to you. Okay, so
wow. Okay.
Yes, won't say anything because we're the ones collecting the money.
Yeah, I mean, my husband's not been working for like 7 or 8 weeks, and we have another at least month to go because of all the therapy appointments she has to have now to recover from this neurological damage. So if that were to happen, I would not be like, no, don't send bill money this way.
Yeah, we'll see. Like, we'll when we run this, we'll put like to donate, and then for them to put Evelyn's name in there, we'll know exactly what that's for. And then CPS can't say shit. They'll have to.
It'll come through us.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're doing okay. God's taking care of us, but yeah, it's always going to be helpful, and we've got a ways to go. So yeah.
So
please just don't take your kids to CMH. Yeah. Thank you for letting me tell Evelyn's story and our family story and warn people about this hellhole. It really was a hellhole. I don't understand how any of the nurses can look at themselves in the mirror in there, like, knowing they're working with people like that. It's so hard. Like, towards the end, one of the cleaning people, I'm trying hard to not use pronouns or anything specific to get them identified. A cleaning person came in and started chatting up with Justin. And he was saying like, oh, our daughter's been medically abused here, blah, blah, blah. And this person said, oh my gosh, like a month or so ago, or however long it was, I shared this image. It was a 10-year-old girl being held hostage here and blah, blah, blah. And she shared her Facebook post, and it was ours. It was our story. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, because like, people are listening. And it sucks. I had a friend say, Jess, I don't even want to say this, but I feel like God made you and Evelyn and Justin to be these people, like, to be the ones that break CMH down. And I was like, well, I don't know if I'm going to accomplish that, but I'm sure as hell going to try, because I can't stand the thought of more kids being abused, murdered, and kidnapped by this hell pit. So
Nicole and I have said it for a long time. God has put us in these positions. We we'll never know why, but
I mean, it's hard. It's hard because they go after your kids, and I totally understand, because I'm in the same position because of the TikTok nurses. Like, my kid, like, I literally had to talk to the police this week because I'm getting death threats towards my children because people don't like what I have to say. And I'm like, you know what? We'll take extra security precautions. And I talked with my husband, talked with the family. I'm like, I'm not fucking stopping.
No,
never.
No, that's what they want. That is what they want. That's how they've thrived, is quiet and secrecy.
That's what the police officer said. It's like, so this has been going on for a while. I'm like, yeah, it's been going on for a couple months, but we just ignored it because I'm not going to feed into this behavior. And then they started all of a sudden turning to my kids. And it's like, they did that on purpose because they know that would trigger you. And we still have guns here. We still have guns, motherfuckers.
Yeah. Well, like, I think it was not last week, but late the week before, I pulled in near my street and there was somebody parked across from the entrance to where we come in, and all the way down the street, I could see them parked there. And I was like, that's weird. But as I turned the corner to go down my street, something in me just went, I think they're here to follow me. And my dad's had military training, and I've actually had some weird experiences with him where he thought someone was following him. And when I was a teenager, I was like, Dad, you're crazy. But we used to live on this loop. So you could go in a loop. He went the loop and they followed us like 3 times and then realized we knew they were following us. And so they went the other way on the last time, like the 4th time through. And I was like, oh my gosh, they were following us. My dad was right. Oh my gosh. So I've learned to trust my intuition about those things. He had training to get that intuition, but I decided to go on a loop too, and they followed me. And then on the 2nd time, they went off on another way, and I went on an inner loop. And then when I was coming back, they had gone down the street, like by my house, and they had parked in front of my neighbor across the street, and they were like backing up into the street to turn around and come back to where I was. But when they saw my car, they bolted out the back entrance instead of trying to go back to me. And I was like,
when I'm on the phone with you and I'm like recording, I'm like, Julia, there's people in front of my house again.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm not crazy. This could be coincidence, but no, this is really
search targeted individuals. And
and I followed them, got close enough to get their license plate. It was a pretty unique one with like specialty plates. I told my husband, hey, just in case something happens to us tonight, here's the description of the vehicle and the the plate. I ended up stopping at a stoplight, watched them turn to go out onto the main road, and I went straight across to go to an area that had a cul-de-sac near me. I turned around, and when I went to cross back over to my street, I was like, I can't see them, but they're there. I can feel it. So we went back home, and I was like, get in the house right now, kids. You cannot disobey. Get in. I got them inside. I went back out to the car to get food, and that truck was driving by our house slow again. And I was like, okay, not a coincidence. This is creepy as hell. So now we have security cameras all around our house. We spent way too much money to get cameras all over our house because I was like, it's not worth it. Also, the gun thing is fun. So, anyways,
it's crazy. It's crazy the stuff that we have to do. We've got cameras all over our house too, and you just have to be. You have to be prepared.
Be vigilant. And I'm just like, it's nuts. It's nuts. So, it's crazy, and I get it. Like, that tendency in families to want to be quiet and just go back to your quiet, private life. It feels good. It does. I don't want to have to go battle a lawsuit with these scumbags for 3 years. I don't want to do that, but I'm gonna, because my kid deserves me to fight like that. And every kid at CMH deserves me to fight like that. So privacy's a little gone for me and gone for you guys now.
Yeah.
All right, Jess, thank you so much for coming on. We'll pull you and feel free to head off, and Julia and I will close up.
You. So, all right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jess. Let us know what we can do to help you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Oh,
I need to breathe. That's like my worst fear, because I'm just like, I think in my small hospital, nobody would fuck with me, but I'm like, what if I had to go somewhere else or something with one of my kids? I'm like, I'd be in jail. Like, I'd be like those other parents. I would be in jail. Like, it's bad. And guys, so if you would like to donate to Evelyn's family, you can donate to AmericanFrontlineNurses.com at the donate tab. And when you donate, make sure to put in the who are you donating in the name of. You can say Evelyn or something like, oh, for the kid on the podcast, her mom was on, something like that. We definitely will understand that it's for Evelyn, and we will forward that money on to them. Okay, so I gotta go. I need a drink now. I hate the snapping cases. I hate it.
Yeah.
And guys, this is why we crowdfund. This is why we take donations, because Julie and I, we don't get paid to run AFLN. We don't. We take the money and we put it back out to help other people. So, I mean, they're banking on the fact that you can't fight back in these situations. So, all right, folks, we'll see you all next Tuesday. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Like, share, upload, download, repeat, because they're trying to scrub everything from the internet. So, all right. Bye, guys.
Bye.